Call this meeting of the Church Cibolo Universal City Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present. That this meeting has been duly called. That notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The time is now 6 o'clock. Roll call.
All board members are present except for Mr. Vito.
Mr. Pito, he said he wasn't coming. He did notify Dr. Gibson and myself. Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Thanks everyone for coming. Executive leadership team. I don't see any other personnel. I think everybody enjoyed Tacit TASB convention. Welcome to Letitia Seaver for her first group meeting with everybody. Call it board meeting, budget workshop. I think Dr. Gibson has had a one-on-one with most everybody here, so that will sort of help with the process moving forward. Anything else, Dr. Gibson?
No, just the, I guess to go a little bit off of that, appreciate the time spent one-on-one. I know that's tough, and last week kind of became this week, and almost everybody around this table has had a long 2 weeks rolled together. So because of our ability to get through that information so well this last weekend, what we're looking at tonight is just, we had said we were going to dig in a little deeper on personnel, and then dig in a little deeper on some large expenditures, and then dig in a little deeper on expenditure projection plan. So tonight we just dig in a little deeper with the HR. Linda has 2 primary asks, or 3 at the end, but we just want to make sure everybody has all the time they need to ask any question that they might have. The overarching purpose of tonight is just to make sure we're all on the same page with things related to salary, benefits, staffing. I guess this is kind of HR night. We expect 45 minutes maybe going through this, and then just see if there's any time for question and answer afterwards. And then, of course, we can always just roll, any topic or concept forward to the regular board meeting or to the coming workshops. I will go ahead and plant the seed. Paige and Wayne and I were looking at what we were looking at in November, and then in December, those 2 items that we had, the large expenditure and the EPP, one consideration is to go ahead and try to address both of those in November, and then either not have the December or just use the December as kind of a rollover, because the more we look at that, you can almost not have a conversation about one without having a conversation about the other. They kind of just go right together. So we would like to kind of collapse what we had originally planned for November and December and just make that our November workshop. Everybody's okay with that? Having said that, I'm good with turning it over to Ms. Cannon. Everybody's ready.
All right, so I've numbered all the pages in the packet that we've given you, so I'll reference the numbers as we go through it. The first section we were going to take a look at is just our budget efficiencies that look at staffing and some of the cost avoidances that we have either chosen or needed to do over time. So on page 1, we've put together a chart of the class size waivers. These are the K4 waivers that we've requested over the years, which we've bumped them up. We try to go around 22-1 in K1, but 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, we're targeting at 24-1. So this past year, we would, looking at the class size waiver, we would have had to actually hire 14 additional teachers at kindergarten through 4th grade in order to get those to 22-1. And that was a cost savings of $910,000 by adding 23 to 24 students in a classroom. So that's number 1 on the cost size waivers. That's a cost efficiency that we're doing. and overtime. The next two pages, pages 2 and 3, are, these are staffing requests. There's a process in place in December and January prior to us going out with the budget to have staff members, directors, principals be able to request additional staff where they feel is necessary. We also look at our staffing guidelines, which we'll touch on a little bit later, to take a look at things that we feel are necessary. These were all vetted through a process of good requests. It's just we haven't been able to actually hire these positions, and these are both between operations and instruction. It's about $2 million of staffing that's been a cost avoidance for us because we haven't been able to staff them. So, for instance, on the instructional side, there's the interventionists in there. There's been a request out on campuses to help with at-risk students. Cibolo Valley is close to 1,000 students. We typically try to give a second counselor when that's the case. We've given a second assistant principal, but we have not given a second counselor. So that's on the list as well. So these are ones that we continually look at each year to see, can we possibly staff some of these requests in the new budget?
Do and Linda, the rounding is in full swing. Just a reminder, for the last 2 cycles, there's been a theme, or at least this last cycle, for don't forget about support staff as we grow.
Correct.
We try to keep up with teachers, but then you increase square footage or you increase the load, and well, that's probably the main thing. Just don't forget about those things as we grow.
Correct.
And I guess these positions would kind of reflect some of those things they're probably talking about.
Right.
Okay.
The next page, page 4, is the TASB recommendations based on some standards for certain positions across districts. They take, I think, an average of what they see out there as far as districts and take some other data to look at even operations staff. And I'll just give you a couple of examples here. With secondary classrooms, their recommendations to do anywhere from 22 to 25. We're staffing our secondary classrooms at 28 and 30. And so we're considerably above that. If we were to go with the recommendation, probably both of our high schools would have to have 3 to 4 more core teachers per subject in order to get them to 25. So we are staffed. That's another cost avoidance for us, is to staff a little bit higher.
So you mean about four cores times 5 teachers equals 20 each times 2, 40 total? That's what
Correct,
okay.
yes.
And 28 to 30 is the average.
That's the average. There
So
are
some could
some.
be less.
Some are less,
And some are more.
considerably more than that. So 35 to even 37 in some of those core classrooms.
And that's a really good point. So people will have experiences different than that, but at the end of the day, from a financial standpoint, we
Right.
just kind of have to aggregate it. We have to
Right.
just
And that's
get
how
that
we
average. But that's a
started.
good point. People see and feel things different than that.
Right.
So just to that point, is there a distinction between what I call core courses versus electives as well? I mean,
Electives, we try to also staff at the 30 to 1. The only one that's staffed at 28 to 1 is the ELA, but then you're gonna have some off courses that we have to look at how many kids have signed up, and if it's less than 30, at what point do we say we're not gonna offer that because there's not enough kids interested in it?
okay, so we do track this based upon like elective
Yes.
courses versus the core courses.
Yes.
things like that.
The, another example here in the operations world is the custodial staff. Per our staffing guidelines, we're staffing 1 custodian for every 22,000 square footage, and the TASB recommendation is 1 per 19,000 square footage. So that's been another place where we've, added square footage to each position so that, we can staff not as, reduce some staff in the custodial area as a cost avoidance. So would we like these recommendations? We sure would, but we haven't been able to really move up, in any area to be able to get to most of these, so.
And you're sharing this under the topic of efficiency.
These are
So
efficiencies.
Staff have a way that it helps us take care of the current budget.
Correct. Is there any questions on that area?
We follow these guidelines, just page 4, how much are we talking about?
I haven't even put that number to,
Just based on, I can figure, probably talking about it's between 3 and 4 million.
at least,
Yes.
because we're talking,
Yeah.
the secondary levels, you're
That's-
probably talking about 40 additional teachers at least for the 2 high schools. Custodians, we were actually looking at putting a cost to that just to see what it would be like to go down to 19,000 per square footage, but overall, this would be a significant increase for us to go by staff.
It's maybe a good exercise to go ahead and cost it, just so we have a
Just
number.
like-
Well, because it would be a good exercise, and I don't think it would take very long
Well, especially if you want to line item, change one, you would know the cost.
of each one.
Yep.
But, yeah, so we could do that, that's a good,
Just with 40 teachers, you figure 80,000 total compensation, talking 3.2 million right
Yeah.
there.
so we'll, that's good, we'll cost that each one.
Just, because if you start adding all this together, it gives us an idea, and when people start asking, where's the money going, or how much you are gonna save, and we have to say, A, B, C, D, here's how much we've already avoided.
Right, correct. The next line item on the agenda was looking at a historical budget.
And then, so, just to that point, so page 2, 3, and 4, if we did all of that, that would be $6 or $7 million.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good, while we're on that subject, it'd be $6 or $7 million, just my quick, okay. That's,
You know, and where I was driving to is that even if the legislature would just index our target revenue, that's $20 million.
yeah, and sometimes when we look at that, we think, well, first we think there's no way, but then we also think, well, is that right? But then we start digging in and looking, we just have taken these things for granted. That, you know, well, we got all these class size waivers, we have $7 million worth of deferred staff, and then you start adding that up and you start realizing, and then maintenance. Well, okay, that may be closer to where it should be 20 million now.
Right.
So anyway, it's just.
And that's, because if you take this right here, say, here's all the cost ones we have done, if the legislature would just do what they're supposed to do as far as properly funding, as far as what we were doing back in '07, we could do all this and still be able to do a few other things, but as long as they're not willing to do that, then it's just gonna continue to escalate.
Yeah.
Correct.
We're willing to negotiate on 50% of that.
That would be nice.
And if you think about it, even if we went all the way to $1.17 and got that 10 million, we would be able to do this, but we can't do it forever. Because then we were right back to starting to cut back again at some point in time. It wouldn't be that far off in the future. We'd be right back where we are right now, cutting back because they're not funding.
That's correct.
Okay. The next slide item on the agenda was the historical budget data. We actually spoke about this at the last budget workshop, and we pulled with Paige's help, pulled the information together for our percent of salary benefits to the total budget. Our average has been about 85%. So even though our salaries have gone up, we still are about the same as far as what we're paying into salary benefits to the total budget.
Since my eyes are playing tricks on me, what is the percentage today? 17, 18?
We budgeted, I think it was 86 point, no, it was 85 point something, 85, 86.
So whatever that number is on the little bar graph on the far left is what, 85 point something you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it hovers around 85 each year.
What was it in 06, 07?
I believe it's 83%.
Yeah, well, I just.
I thought the budget the other day had 86 or 87, somewhere in that neighborhood.
In 0607, 83%. Today, 85%. This budget was built on 85% for the average of all cumulative is 85%.
Okay, so the most recent budget has it at 85%?
Yes.
Okay, the next area, we're getting into staffing. This is how we first look at allocating staff for our Each school year is looking at, on page 6 and 7 is our staffing guidelines. These are based on what we think we can afford at the current time, and even in some of these areas, we haven't been able to staff completely. This is kind of our, I guess, our targeting year to start looking at it, when we start looking at staffing in the budget. As an action tonight, I guess our discussion would be is, would you want us to place the staffing guidelines in the budget parameter memo each spring so that you have an eye on that as you're approving the budget parameter memo? We've typically put their staffing ratios as far as class sizes, what we target for class sizes in the budget parameter memo, but we've never put really the full set of guidelines. But we could do that, you know, moving forward so that you have eyes on what our staffing guidelines are currently.
Yeah, so we'll pause there for just a second and go ahead and make that a question. Or just do what we've been doing. What it dawned on us is that we haven't really reviewed these annually with the board, and that's really was the purpose of tonight. In other words, we'll reference them, but we haven't really put them in your hand, I guess. So is it good enough just to say annually you want to just review them, or do you want them embedded in the budget parameter memo, or?
Well, I'm just glad we had them, I mean, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I think for a while we didn't.
Yeah, it was been kind of a work in progress for the last few years.
Because there was no rhyme or reason of how many are we supposed to have.
Right.
So I'm looking at some of these and thinking, it does not based on any of how many students there are. Like, for example, a reading specialist. So do we need to add so many students? Because there's a big difference between at one, based on your numbers, than a high school. Does that make sense? Because some of them are based on students' numbers, like assistant principals, counselors, and that. And even librarian assistants and nurses, and, you know, when we get a nurse assistant. But then when you start flipping to the next page, some of those aren't based on numbers. Do we, I'm just asking.
Yeah,
Do we need to have that?
Sometimes it's based on the type of students that they're serving as well.
Mhm.
So for instance, with some of our reading specialists, they're doing purely dyslexia. So then we have to take a look at the dyslexia numbers to see can one person service that many students? And so we've had to add in some areas for that reason. So, but I think it's probably through even like the TASB reviews and things that they have to offer, if there is a way that we can get some good data on at what point do you look at
Yeah.
that?
And you, on that reading specialist, you say additional one at 1,000, so I guess the assumption is that it's one up to 1,000, and then.
I guess I was looking at junior high and high school, when it just has one.
Yeah, well, that's true, and so that would probably need to, can you
Yeah,
quantify?
well, junior high and high school is done a little bit differently than the elementary and intermediates.
I mean, and
So
I
it's
just
done
pulled
by-
that one out, for
yeah.
example, but some of them, I know we started the conversation by what we can afford, but do we
Right.
need it by what we need?
Would-
Obviously, we don't have one month to do everything we need, but, you know, some of that, I don't know.
At
I'm
the-
reading the yellow book, but.
At the junior highs and high schools, because they teach core sections too,
Mhm, right.
that sometimes we base it on, at those levels, we're looking at every course section that every, even if they're support, they're, you know, what
Mhm.
classes they're teaching, and do we need to add based on the numbers of at-risk students that are going into those courses, if that makes sense.
Well, and I was even looking at like the office clerk and or the campus secretary, you know, is it always just one, you know, or do we need, is it per how many people are coming into, you know, how many students are in there? I just, do we need it by enrollment numbers for more of these?
So let us
Just
take
throwing it
that
out
and
there.
go back through this, and we'll just kind of listen to what you're saying, and then kind of go through this and see if that does modify any of it.
It may not, I just
Right,
was wondering,
but
some,
it's a
it's
fair
very
question.
quantifiable when you look at it that way too, sometimes on making a decision, do we need another one or not?
And that reading homework that we were assigned talks in detail
That's,
about
that's the yellow book.
numbers and how it changes and how it's mismanaged. Even if there's more English language learners in one school than another, and you get one per school, you're mismanaging.
That's correct. So, for instance, our Title I schools have additional support that the schools that are not Title I have, that are above and beyond these staffing guidelines, based on the population of students at those schools.
So the concept is that moving forward, even hypothetically, if money isn't as big of an option sometime in the future, to still review this at some time late in the fall semester, is that right? Because if a change is going to be recommended, you need to know, and y'all need to know by January.
Correct.
Is that right? So
Yes. And there's
it
another.
dawns on me that, I know I'm kind of backtracking on this, but maybe this could just be on the board master calendar, review of it in November each year or something like that. And it'll be part of the budget parameter. We could reference it, these staffing guidelines, or this staffing ratio is based on staffing guidelines or whatever.
There is a part of this later on in the agenda as well that, we have consistently for every 4 years asked TASB to do a staffing salary study for us to kind of get recommendations on where we are with salaries. Another service they offer, and a request is, do we want to put in every 4 years a staffing review where they would go over some of the standards that they have and say, okay, you do need to put at certain levels an additional support person in, or your maintenance staff, they're understaffed or overstaffed, that kind of thing. So that could also help guide us with development of these.
Yeah, making recommendations for modifications to our guidelines.
Yes.
From a quote-unquote neutral source is one way to look at it.
Yep.
So on that overarching question, is everybody just good with us just saying we're board discussion item each fall or report item? I don't know that you need the board to approve them, because then if we have to modify them in the spring, the board would have to vote to unapprove them. So it would just be a board report, staffing guidelines. If y'all are all right with that, that just hit me. That may be the best way, most efficient way to do this.
Well, I see it as I see this as a snapshot, but I did go to a presentation where they encourage board members to see more of the trend as opposed to just a snapshot. So what I see here is this year. What I don't see is for the last 4 or 5 years, and sort of see, so we've had an increase in teachers, 20 teachers a year, and where that 20 teachers were placed and why they went to, sort of see a trend. And maybe compare that trend with the number of students or the cost or something like that, but basically looking for trends, because trends are gonna tell us probably more than just a snapshot.
Yeah, so I would assume part of that report in November would be staffing guidelines, and then we would give an update on where we are and where we've been for the last few years, so that the board has awareness. Because if we wait and do that late in the spring, it's too late for us really to do anything about it.
I totally see what you're saying, Robert, because we gave, we didn't have to hire because of our growth, but where did those, and most of them went to classroom, but did they always go to classroom just to see where our trend has been in the past?
So I'm saying in November, make that broader than just staffing guidelines. It's staffing guideline and staffing report. I mean, it's just a report on those topics like you're saying.
I would still sort of like to see if it can be placed on a graph. I don't know which way or how you would determine it, but all of these numbers, sometimes you're like, it muddles the whole big picture. You're trying to make sense of all the numbers. If you're not a numbers guy like Ed, sometimes pictures just make sort of a more whole sense of.
So are you wanting for each one of these positions,
I
the
don't know.
numbers?
I'm not sure how it's gonna look.
Yeah, and I would say let's just work on it. All I'm saying is that do y'all want it on the November agenda, and then we'll make it look however you want it to look.
I'm just looking for trends, but
Right. No, we'll do, generally speaking, we say data is useless unless it has a trend and a comparison. TASB is kind of the comparison in some ways, right? What
Right,
we're asking them to
correct.
do is to give us a benchmark, and then the trends would be what Mr. Westbrook is talking
I
about.
guess I'm not understanding what we need to put together, but we can talk about that.
let me see if I can find the graph that was presented at the presentation, then I'll forward it to you and see if we can make heads or tails. If it can't be done in a graph, fine, that's no problem.
Are you,
I'll lean on
talking about types of students or just total numbers of students and matching to
And
positions?
we're gonna talk about it anyway, okay.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm just looking for a trend. I'm not sure if I can determine a trend from this.
Yeah.
So I don't know, how would you
This-
compare?
Yeah, this isn't meant to
last
show
5
a
years?
trend, this is just meant to get us, each year as we start to budget, when we look at the number of kids per campus, how are we going to staff that campus? So, this is just meant to guide us as we get through, as we get the demographer's report, and it tells me at Cibolo Valley, there's gonna be this many kindergartners, this many first graders, overall, there's gonna be this many kids at this campus, then I'm gonna take these staffing guidelines and try to staff up. Or when we have an opening, a new school, then you're gonna look at, okay, what do we need to do to staff up that new school?
It's a baseline.
It's a baseline, really.
Maybe it could be done by bar graph, last 5 years, up and down, based upon the number of teachers that were added per campus. And then you could sort of see a trend upward for campus, number of educators.
You're wanting
per
number of
campus.
positions with campuses, tied to campuses with teachers, that's doable.
That's maybe doable.
Yeah.
You just sort of say, these campuses are increasing educators at a faster rate than these, and maybe why, I don't, but at least you can see a trend
You'd have to show the enrollment trend over time to go
over
with
the
that.
last 5 years. You just sort of see a trend.
Yeah.
Staffing guidelines are moving up based upon the comparison, like you said, from CASB. Trends of educators going up. I like to use the word educators or teachers. I don't know what people prefer, but anyway. I like the word educator, but anyway.
Well, we,
I'm
We
looking for a
call all of
trend.
our staff educators,
Yeah, we-
so we designate them as teachers.
Okay.
Because we consider every staff, even a custodian in a classroom or child nutrition, they're educators for us.
so is, no, so historically, here comes the budget parameter memo every early spring, and we haven't had any of this background conversation. So then y'all are looking at just this staffing number, and it just struck us that could really not make sense, because there really hadn't been a discussion. So is it November, is it December? When is the right time to do that before the budget stuff starts? Maybe it's January, I don't know. It's really y'all's, and that's y'all's call, what's the right time to do it?
But there's probably no perfect time, the very first time you do it. Go in November, see how it works out. If it doesn't work out, switch the dates.
Well, you want to give Linda time to put everything together, so it takes till December, then it takes till December.
Yeah.
And the first time to do something is,
December's probably fine, but if it sparks a conversation, then that'll give us January and February to kind of round that out before we're trying to get the budget parameter. So, okay, we'll shoot.
I don't see how come she can't give it to us by Thanksgiving.
Well, she'll probably do it
I'm
tonight.
joking, I'm
if you want
joking.
to.
I'm joking, I'm
She'll
joking.
make you go sit down somewhere and she'll have it ready later tonight. You're gonna eat cookies.
I'm joking, all right. What's
But,
next?
no, I think that's good. So that was one of the big outcomes, was just like, when is that report and
Yeah.
what does it need to look like? And I think that's really good.
I have one thing, a lot of these have got based on student enrollment numbers, and everything else kind of goes additional of 1 and 1,200. Could you expand on those, what that means? Because that's,
Give me one of the ones that says that.
choir music at the high school, junior high is based on, you got strings, arts, rotation, electives, PE. They got sending ESL across all grade levels, computer teacher at the high school level. Then you've also got child nutrition, students served, divided by number of lines. Just that one, you probably think too much, but everything else is like, what do those numbers look like?
Well, what we do each spring is kids enroll for classes. One of the things I'm waiting on from the secondary levels is for them to be able to then give me data on who has signed up for what
So
courses.
Linda, I see what Mr. Finley's saying, that this might more clearly say based on on students required to serve. This just looks like we add someone, if they're at 100 kids
No, it's
overall.
based
No,
on who
I
signs
know,
up
it's
for
just
the forms.
semantics, it's just semantics,
Yeah.
and so that's, I think that, is that what you're saying, Mr.
Just ballpark. I mean, everything else you kind of got where, two per campus over 500 at P, one addition at 500, then two per campus over 500, and then based on student enrollment numbers.
So Linda, what's
It's
you're saying?
enrollment in that course is what it is.
because not every kid takes that course.
Right, but you gotta have some kind of a guideline somewhere that
Right.
says,
Ed's trying to think, he's saying, like, how many strings teachers are you gonna have? It depends
Based on
on how
what?
many, yeah.
Well, we're gonna pull the list out of ITEX of how many kids have signed up for strings.
Right.
And then taking that same 28 to 30 ratios,
Okay,
or
so it is-
then we're gonna look at, okay, is there
That's-
2
that's what
teachers
I'm-
needed, is there 3
where-
teachers, is there,
where's your ratio at?
yeah.
I'd say I was more on ESL, because that was mentioned, that's the kids that qualify.
Those are the kids that qualify.
This
yes.
just says based on student enrollment number, so you mean the enrollment number of the kids that qualify?
In that program, yes.
Right. I didn't know,
So-
he may have thought that this just meant at 700,
No,
we add.
no, that- You're exactly right, it's how many kids were showing up, so if you have 1 to 28, or 1 to 30, or 1 to 14, what's your guidelines you're following there as far as how many teachers are gonna have per how many kids that are run that program? There's gotta be some kind of, you gotta have some kind of set of numbers that you're gonna base that on.
Well,
Which is, I think
you
we're
really
talking about
can't,
semantics.
because it depends on, okay, so say 35 sign up, that might be too much for one course,
Okay, what are you talking about right now? What?
like strings.
Okay.
We might have to divide that into 2 courses, and then you look at, can that teacher travel and things like that. There's a lot of factors that go into it, so, but the thing that stays constant is we're pulling numbers out of ITEX for the number of kids that have signed up for a course, for everything at the junior high and high school level. And then we base our staffing on, okay, do we need 1 class, 2 classes? Sometimes it's based on,
What happens if
beginning,
1 year?
intermediate.
What happens if 1 year 4 times as many kids signed up than you expect? What do you do?
Then we either have to cut, we have to have it draw a line of where we say only this many kids can do it, or we have to hire more teachers for that.
Sometimes if it's less, then we'll have a teacher that teaches both, especially in some of the arts that you're talking
So
about.
there
They'll
is-
teach 2 or 3 sections of the high school, and 2 or 3 sections of the junior high. Orchestra is a good example of that. And
So there is some cut point in there, I think is what he's getting at, where we start making decisions about we have to borrow somebody from somewhere else, or we give them.
It doesn't have to be specific, just some kind of a general guideline what you're trying to follow in there. I mean, I realize that you got numbers you have to base on, when you have 300 kids in band 1 year and 250 the next, or 200 1 year and 350 the next, those numbers are gonna change, but there's gotta be some kind of basic guideline you're trying to follow. It's, you gotta get how many teachers you need to take care of these many kids.
What are the factors or the assumptions you go on in making any decision for this right here?
To make this list, or to?
Or to make any decision wherever he's going, the
I'm pulling
staff
those
ratios?
master schedules, and I'm
Yeah, just,
meeting with every campus principal, I'm meeting usually with director of secondary ed. We're sitting down, we're looking at, okay, you've got this many algebra kids, but you know, you could collapse this and still say, you know, this teacher can go to teach algebra to keep up with those. It's a lot of conversations on that,
So are you talking
from
about?
all levels.
If I may, Linda, it may help to say that a teacher at the high school has 7 sections, and so it's based on 6 of 7 sections. So if there are enough sections to complete a full teaching load, then.
That's
that
what
would be
he's
a teacher.
saying, and so,
Yes.
yeah, it's, I think to just add, it's not just, you're not, if there's 4 times more than you expected, you're not going to go hire 4 teachers.
No, I might go over to the other campus and see,
Okay,
did
so
they make their
that's what-
numbers? I'm gonna take that teacher and move them over here, and they'll
So that's
split,
what,
have
so
travel.
it's based on student enrollment numbers compared to a full teaching load, I think is what, and that, we'll just add that, it's just semantics, Linda, because then, and then we do cost shares between campuses, is what I also heard just then, is that right? If it's
Yes,
down
we
one
do.
area and if it's up another, we'll add that in here. I wanna clarify on ESL, the students sign up and they either qualify or they don't. And then we know how many ESL kids we need to serve, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll make that box say that it's based on the qualification by the kids. Do you see what I'm saying, instead of just,
That would be speech.
yeah, some of the other ones, I just use that as a, yeah. That's good, so to see, there was some internal where we knew what the assumptions were, and now we're making it a little more external, and this is good to clarify the semantics.
And I know you're exactly right, that from 1 year to the next, you can't necessarily know what you're gonna have, but it's just a better understanding of what you kind of go through at a very high level, not now in the weeds, but just at a
Yeah.
very high level of the process you're going through to make those determinations. Just so I try to understand a little better.
Sure, no problem.
She'll have them ready by December.
I'll make those changes.
No pressure.
Actually, well, let's do a run through them with that kind of in mind, and then we'll put it in a board update in the next few weeks to see if the language, whatever else is still unclear or fuzzy, then, we'll just keep trying to tighten up the language, so that when we make the report, I think that's the benefit to doing this, so in December, when we make the report, that there's not confusion about the semantics of what that means.
Right.
We know what it means.
To be fair, can you also include like admin?
On the numbers.
Yeah, on the comparison on the numbers, just sort of see trending. If there were 50 admin people 5 years ago and today there's 150,
So we have.
and where those
here,
admin people are at.
We have principal, assistant principal, but you're talking about central office as well.
I'm thinking central office
Okay.
unless a board member wants.
Okay.
And you would almost do those separate from admin at a campus.
Yeah. So we can add that, and there are ratios that are given in first on other places, so that may be as close as we can give, just compared to the ratios.
That's what
Okay. Let's move on. Okay, page 8. This is just a summary, definitely not finalized, but it's a summary of myself working with Ms. Williams to really work on the special ed that's really becoming an anomaly, trying to figure out how we can best serve our students and make sure that they get their needs met. So this is just an overall summary, just so you know that we're trying to work through some things. And she and I are going out to campuses and talking with the campus admin and really trying to see what we can do to make sure kids' needs are being met in the area of special ed. We're seeing some definite needs as far as some kids that have moved in with definite intensive needs, and then trying to get that done as far as staffing, and then also just meeting their IEPs as was presented in ours. So we're just working through some of that and trying to figure out how we could correctly staff with special ed.
Will we be able to do this within existing budget, or will we potentially need to bring a budget amendment back to the board?
We may need to bring a budget amendment back to the
Because
board.
these are immediate needs.
These are immediate needs, and what we've done currently is to make sure that we're helping out the campuses, is we're pulling some of our substitutes and training them up to go into the campuses and help with supporting special ed. So, and we've pulled both paras, and we've also pulled teacher substitutes that are certified in that field to be able to work with some of the campuses currently, so that nobody's, out there trying to get it all met with their current staff.
And just as a reminder, we have two things that are kind of working, I don't want to say against us, but that are creating some of this. One is the change in the state quote unquote cap, and so parents are aware of that, and so we're trying to find equilibrium on, there used to be this cap that was set, so it was a little easier for us to predict. And the other one is we have a good reputation, especially in the military community, and so we wind up having move-ins, if you will, for students with special needs. And that's a good thing, but then it's also a challenge for us to project. So to get, and thank you, Amy, because this is potentially an 18-19 discussion, but it would also be a 19-20.
We're tracking, like for the extra help, we're trying to establish a trend after September, safe to forecast out if this is how much extra help that we're going to need. We're going to know when we're going to hit the wall. And we'll have to, we would have to come back. Same thing with contracted services. If we're having to contract services, we budgeted a fair amount for that. But again, we're forecasting out, monitoring it over time, and it could become an 18-19 discussion.
So when, if it does, when would it, do you anticipate? I'm just asking a ballpark.
Probably the new year.
Okay, so January.
And
Yeah.
also on these special ed needs, that's not every school as I count. I'm missing
We're
2,
making our
3,
way to
4,
every
5,
school.
6, 7.
Yeah.
So there could be a longer list.
There could be a longer list. We have 2 more this week that we're going to visit, and there's probably a 3rd or 4th on the horizon for us to go take a look at.
I was rounding today, and they're happy that y'all are coming to meet. And so, it's good that you're going out and
Yeah.
going straight to them, and they appreciate you coming to them. as
Yeah,
well.
and they're also trying to make adjustments within their own schedules with the current staff that they have to see if they can really make some of this work without asking for additional needs. But as they're doing that, they're still coming up short in some areas and are needing that extra help.
So everybody just put an asterisk, everything else here is 1920.
But this could
Except
be.
this. And this is, it's still 1920, but it's also 1819, so just gonna hold that thought. Sounds like we'll be back in December and January.
What's our percentage right now of special ed?
Kim, do you, the percent special ed that we're at right now?
Right now, we're about 10.5, 8.5 was the cap. And I think national average is about 12%. So people keep saying, where will our equilibrium be? So the word on the street would be somewhere around 12% potentially.
And nationally, it's 12.5, so you have to kind of think we're probably gonna go north of 10,
Oh, yes.
before it's,
So right now, we're about 10.5,
Yes, sir.
yeah,
That
12.
doesn't count 504s.
yeah.
You know,
So, that's
one
just
district in
special.
Houston is running 16%, they're
Yeah.
expecting to go to 18
Yeah.
next year.
It's a big number.
But how do you guard against, the trend is upward, but how do you guard against overestimation? You know what I'm saying, like?
It's all about the quality of the testing and the diagnostics that are being done. But there's, it technically it should be being done against a, set criteria. It's just the quality of the people that we have that are in there doing the assessments.
The cap is off right now.
We have ongoing professional development about best practices and evaluation, and getting a lot of feedback from campuses before the evaluation ever gets to the special ed department.
And then I'll go ahead and plug that one way to look at it too is making sure that there's a strong enough intervention program with your non-special ed so that students, we catch them at tier 2, tier 3 before that ever happens, which the interventionists that are noted on page whatever going back, that's a big part of what that is to serve students before they maybe exhaust their gen ed steps, if you will, to put a few more tools in that toolbox.
Does special ed education have their own budget?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
They do.
You have your own budget?
The staffing budget is just like any staffing budget,
But let's clarify.
Yeah.
Maggie Corneo has her own budget.
Right.
And Wayne has his own budget.
Right.
Bond.
And then special education has a budget as well.
Well,
But it's
no,
within-
not
it's
the
within
same.
the-
That's an enterprise fund and that's
Oh.
a separate enterprise
Yeah,
fund.
their
She
own
doesn't have a
function.
separate enterprise fund. If she quote unquote goes over, that's just moving out of the.
Oh, it's moving, yeah.
Right out of the M&O budget into the special ed budget. Whereas Maggie couldn't do that, or the health insurance program couldn't do that, or.
Well,
the
and even,
bond couldn't
one
do
thing that we'll have to say about that too, in instruction, a lot of our money is in function 11. We have a lot more cushion in function 11 than we would say in nursing, and they have nursing services that are needed in special ed. And when I say we would come back to the board, I can't imagine that in function, that we would have to come back unless that we were gonna have a deficit budget. But we might have to come back to change, say, you know what, we need to move some money to cover nursing services, or we might have to move some money to cover assessment, which is in function 31. So I know that's a little bit hard to understand. I don't think that special ed's gonna, take over the whole budget, but there are some specialized areas within special education that we might not have
We just gotta
budgeted
move the
for.
pie piece.
Right, right.
Yeah, and so
That's the fight.
on the 1920
Right.
forecast that Paige did for you all, that's why you added that last line item
Right.
with that and security and a couple of others that we anticipate we're gonna have to add a little bit to the budget for these topics. And, whatever that number was the number, but you had security, special ed, and then one other, I can't.
Property insurance.
Yeah, property insurance is creeping up right now.
That's a function move, that's not a budget. That's not an
Right.
approved budget, that's a function move.
Right, and I switched to 1920. She's just saying
Right.
that this year we may have to make a budget amendment within the budget.
Right.
1920, we may have to add money for these topics that we're
But
talking
again,
about.
that's within the overall M&O budget, not the.
Right.
So it's a function move.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And, so somebody, not anyone in this room, but someone may say, well, then just do it. Well, okay, that eventually is cutting someone else's something on the other side. I mean, you know, so it's just, it's not as easy as just do it. All right, that's a good discussion. You mentioned the staffing.
Yes, the next, page 9 is what CASB offers as a staffing review. The consideration here would be is whether, you know, we've always done that salary study every 4 years. Do we want to, in a cycle, go ahead and add in a staffing review from CASB as well? That might help us with our guidelines and different, you know, these are instructional guidelines. We also currently would even be looking at our operations side and are we staffed, you know, overstaffed, understaffed in that area as well. So this is something, like I said, another service that they offer that we could put into a 4-year cycle off of when we do the salary study.
I think so the cost is about 20,000.
Right, yeah, about 20,000, same as the salary study.
It couldn't hurt if we, so at least we would know where we're at.
Yeah, I think to do it every year is too much, but you know,
Oh, yeah.
every 4 or 5 years to kind of check it against our guidelines is probably not a bad idea.
Well, on the Salary and Benefits Committee, we agreed that it was a good idea, but what's the risk of doing it? Let's just say they come back and say you're overstaffed here. Are we gonna let some people go? That's not happening.
Well, we usually do it through attrition.
Attrition usually.
So we make adjustments through attrition. We do that all the time.
Yeah, but attrition could be years. They could still be, we could still be paying these people that TASB says, you don't need X number of people. And so you happen through attrition. So let's just say that attrition doesn't happen for 4 or 5 more years. We've paid this teacher that essentially, according to TASB, overstaffed for 4 or 5 more years.
I don't think, that's a good point you're bringing. I don't think we're worried about that.
I was about to say, have we had any of that?
No, this budget's so lean. This is the leanest budget around. So it's a fair point you're making, but I think we feel confident that.
On the flip side, they're gonna say we need to staff more.
Well, we're at 7 million,
Well,
so
or we're-
we'll put it on a tab.
Well, I mean, that's, I'm like, I say it wouldn't hurt, but then I also know, we know our district the best too, of how we should staff it.
Right.
On the flip side too,
That's a-
what our needs are.
Just in the teacher round, how many new teachers did we bring in for this school year? 50?
Additional?
Additional or just?
Either replacement or new.
We took from the fast growth and did not hire.
Well, what, okay, so what, it's 200 kids, so what would that be?
No. How many due to retirements or resignations?
Overall, about at least 100, I'd say.
So out of 100 out of what, 1,500 teachers? So that's.
Well, about
1,000
1,000 teachers.
So 10%, we had a 10% turnover. So 1 year we had 100 turnover and our staffing said we needed to lose 5. We just would hire 95 instead of 100 that year
Correct.
and make the adjustment from that.
There are
we made some
benefits to
adjustments like
growing. I've been in a
We
school
did.
district that didn't grow. What you described as devastating there, because you have no flexibility to make adjustments. You know, you have to make, growing it helps because you generally have enough transition.
We did exactly what you're saying this school year because we were staffed very, very tight. And so we had to tell principals, you know what, based on where we are this year, you're not gonna be able to replace that position based on the enrollment numbers.
Right, so 1 year we had 40, next year we had 39, and you had 5 teachers that were leaving, and you only replaced 4 of them, but that was attrition happening automatically.
Okay, so on page 4, doesn't that already give us the benchmarks for what they say we probably should have?
That's a general idea, yes, but they will go a lot deeper into a staffing
Okay.
review. Yeah.
That is that's the framework they'll use when they come in and analyze everything. And maybe, oftentimes it's just reclassifying positions or getting the job descriptions up to date, you know, things like that, so that it's a better representation of what we're trying to have them accomplish. I don't know, I think maybe we haven't done that staffing guidelines yet. We've done the salary study 3 times
Yeah.
since I've been here, or 2 times.
Oh, we've never done the staffing?
We've never done the staffing, so if it doesn't deliver what we
We just
think,
do it again.
well, then we just won't do it again, that's exactly right. But we'll, if it helps, if we feel like, yeah, this really helps us, then we'll do it. If we kind of, at the end of that day, if we go, no, we know this better, then they know. So, but I think it's worth having a neutral third party look at it. Okay, salary?
Salary, page 10 is the teacher salary scale that we've typically looked at each year. But on page 11, I wanted to share with you the operations well, not just operations, these are other positions besides teachers and what their minimum and maximum rate is. I'm able to pull this out of TASB HR services, so as they update it this year, I can update for the current year. This was last year's. And you'll see here that we're either right where others are or a little bit below, maybe a little bit above, but we're not significantly above anybody in most of these positions. So, but it's just good for us to take a look at and see, what is the, where are we with all of these staff besides teachers?
According to the presentation method, so I go to TASB, learn a little something.
Yeah.
Sometimes this might be helpful. At least one other board member says that you, based upon,
You're talking about this one?
yes.
Okay.
So if you salary study, if you could add in turnover ratio per category, because then it might help justify paying somebody that much or not. You see what I'm saying? If there's an 8% turnover ratio at 20 years and at first year,
I'm actually working on turnover ratio for other positions besides teachers.
Okay.
Teachers is what we get data on, and it's always a year behind, so I keep kind of my own legend of that for each year, but I'm actually going to work on department data as well.
Did you get the teacher data, by year of service?
yeah.
That's what it
By
is.
year certain.
By
huh?
year of service, yeah, exactly. So is there a higher turnover ratio for 1 to 5 years versus
That's what he's asked.
Okay.
25 to 28? And we know there's different concerns because there's spouses, you move and go between spouses and jobs, I get that one, but turnover ratio is turnover ratio. I'm not sure how far you could disaggregate the data.
We might have to look them all up if it doesn't
You'd
come
have to look
us
it all up.
that way.
You get a little bit of that through the TASB exit survey, but that's if they take that survey. And we don't have a high percentage of participation in that. So we'd have to look at
We get this one
everybody.
big aggregated number after everything's audited, is that right?
Correct, and it's a year behind.
It's a thought. If you can't do it by years of service, don't worry about it. It's just a thought that I heard.
Dave, can you do your gizmos and stuff?
I'm looking at my
Okay.
gizmos
Don't
right
do it
now.
right now, but do your.
Okay,
yeah.
one way to kind of accomplish that possibly is just, I know you guys have the numbers on how many teachers we have in each of these categories, right?
Yes.
That's not too hard to come up with, right? Like, how many first-year teachers do we have? How many
You're
20-year
very
teachers do we
honest.
have?
Mhm.
And
Well,
already
we would
the
have to,
numbers.
with payroll, if it's paid, right? You have to know what the year of service is in payroll.
But on non-teacher, that's gonna be a little more problematic.
If they're not a teacher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to go by hire date versus work today. That'd be an interesting calculation. You could do it, but it would take some serious
So
time.
what were you,
to add the calculation.
what were you
I was
talking
just
about
gonna
that
work
you're
on
about to-
from, like with the teachers, if the teachers, start with us 1 year and then aren't with us the next year to start, they're considered a turnover, no matter what for. I mean, if they retire, they're considered a turnover. So I was thinking of doing the same thing for, bus drivers. How many started with us 1 year, but then didn't finish with us the next year.
So when you finish that list of teachers, give it to Paige, and then Paige, you tell us what year, that's what they're saying. You just, I think that's what Gary did, then you tell us what 1, 5, 3, what they're, and that'll work initially. We'll just make that, so we're seeing at what,
That would be interesting.
what level they were with us when they turned over, and we'll see if there's a pattern, that's what you're talking about.
I guess, Robert, I assume your point is, if we've got a much higher ratio of turnover of bus drivers, there may be some other jobs, and maybe we need to pay our bus drivers more. Instead of just a
That's what
5% across
That's
the
what-
board pay
yes.
raise,
Yeah.
let's target it towards certain groups that we maybe have a part-time, I assume that's the purpose, right?
Yeah, it's pay
And that's what she's.
So when TASB does its study, do they just base it on market rates, or do they, I don't think they base it on turnover, right? It's
They
just really what is
market
everybody else around here pay?
rates.
Theoretically, you would compare that to what you find out on turnover and try to see if maybe there's
Correlation.
a correlation
Yeah.
between the two. But
That'll be interesting.
what Linda's trying to do is getting at what you're referencing. She's trying to figure out, are there patterns to turnover in non-teacher positions, is that right?
Correct.
So you're
We'll
right
bring
about
that, and then we'll start with that, and then we'll see where the conversation goes after that. That'll be part of the staffing report in December.
our January.
Yeah.
We're just gonna keep pushing another
More
one.
weight.
Poor Linda.
The more we talk,
I just
it'll
have
be
one
February in a
specific
little bit.
one. I just have one specific. So most of these are in the zone, except for transportation dispatcher. We're like 30 to 40% higher on that. Is that for a reason?
Never have studied it, so I don't know.
We just now got it charted for the
Okay,
first time.
right,
so
sorry.
it's-
I'm
Yeah,
curious.
my 2 cents worth on this. Again, I would say that's almost kind of at a level where it's below where the board should be analyzing. That's my personal opinion. That's kind of the administration to deal with, but we should be setting a policy on, we would like to see our teachers and staff paid at the X% across the board, or we would like to be in the 25th percentile or something like that. That's the board function. And you guys run the numbers on, are we meeting that or are we not? And what's the turnover ratios, instead of the board trying to pick and choose which spots we ought to get paid.
Yeah, and that, thank you for that. So, and that's a really good, so all of this salary, all the way through page 25 is just to like give you stuff to look at. But then what
Yeah.
Ms. Trimman just said is the question. Based on that, where do you, we don't have to answer this tonight, but that is the question, you know, what's the target? Because we're gonna try to keep it in whatever target. And we haven't really asked this question of the board before now. Where do you want us? Are we overpaying? Are we underpaying?
Heck, I think otherwise you always live in a world where staff is always gonna feel like they're being underpaid. I mean, always. No matter what they're getting paid, they're gonna feel like they're being underpaid. So then we're always pressured to increase that, even though it may not be based on some kind of prearranged idea of what a rational pay would be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The answer to how much do you want is always gonna be more.
Right.
And we can't possibly satisfy that. So then we have to decide, are we hitting our parameters, and then any extra money we then put somewhere else? Because otherwise staff is always gonna want more. I mean, that's just,
Yeah, so that's, so is it the top quartile, is it the top decile, is it the top? You know, is it the top, just be in the top 50%, you know, what?
But to Gary's point and Tisha's point, so Bill Rutherford addressed this. A board member says, how far so-called in the weeds, or how much data can I ask for? You're entitled to ask for all the data you want. But it was, his standpoint was, hey, it's better to focus on the forest as opposed to each individual tree. You gotta find what makes you happy as a board member. Obviously, his standpoint for, we're getting in the weeds, he's been around for 18 years. But if you feel like you need to get a little bit more information, you need to be comfortable as a board member, and I think that's important also. So if you're,
Well, since it's never been done before, we won't know until we see it, and it may be everything we can find it out. It's also gonna be good information for the administration that y'all don't know either.
Yeah,
So,
I can just tell you,
Down that path.
we just tried to give some raises to help offset healthcare increases.
Yeah.
That's been our strategy. It's not even a strategy, but if you put a gun to my head and said, what's our strategy, that would be the answer I would give you. So but we're trying to determine now what is our salary strategy. And, you know, we want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Until you provide those numbers everybody agrees to, or what that baseline is, and you don't know where you're at, so you don't know where to go. Until you establish that, you have to have that baseline.
I just don't want her to be discouraged from asking anything she ever wants to
The
ask.
numbers were sitting there.
Yeah. She hasn't indicated
And
that
honestly,
she's
that would
afraid
be,
to ask.
that would be something
Yeah.
TASB would look at to market to see, are we above that? And they'll give us a figure of you're 110% above market, or you're 95% of market. So they'll make suggestions on every position if we need to make adjustments to it.
And if I may, it also depends on the job descriptions on there. That person may be doing 3 jobs.
Yeah,
So, we'll look at it.
our job description may be a little different than our surrounding districts.
But the salary study forces us to go look at it and make sure that's the case, so that we're
Mhm. Yep.
comfortable that.
And we get those questions on the outliers, and then that's what the research we go do.
So do you, does the board want just time to think about a target salary? What'd you call it, Linda?
Compensation target.
Compensation target, thank you. Yeah, thank you, compensation target.
Just speaking for myself, I would be uncomfortable if we, in any position, we ever went below the top quartile. Now, if you, the rest is open to discussion, but that would be uncomfortable for me to even, I know we're not approving it as a board, but even for me to even go along with it, it seems.
So let me just see. There's any discussion on quartile, top quartile?
The danger in that, like Robert, you were saying also earlier, like if TASB does do a study and decides that we've got way too many teachers in a certain category, then what? The risk of setting that 25th percentile too is, well, what if we're paying way above that? And then what? You know, you're gonna, we can't technically cut salaries, but just,
No,
You'd
what-
be in the top quartile.
you know, I guess top quartile can always,
You're already in the top quartile.
there is no cap on that, right? I mean, if
No,
you
there's
don't look
no
at it
cap
that
on
way.
that.
Well, but if you-
Mathematically, you are the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would be the 100th percentile, the very top.
And there, I think the only way to get at, let's just do an assumption that if you were trying to, you were higher than the top quartile, let's just say,
Yeah.
over the 100th percentile. So I think the only way to change that is to consider, let's do an assumption of a 2% raise, just for this argument. So you do 1% to the pay scales and 1% as a one-time payment. Then if everybody else gave a 2% to the pay scale, then technically the scales are kind of reaching an equilibrium, but the staff got a full 2%. I'm not saying, I'm not recommending that, I'm just saying that's kind of the way I think you would have to get there.
I can see too, I mean, this seems like a bigger conversation, but I can see at least having a floor as well. Like, I mean, start there, like, we want every one of our positions to be at least in the top 50th percentile or something. I don't know where we are on this and how much it would cost to get us there.
I think that's good,
You know, and
to
that
say
way,
minimum of 50 percentile.
we may be in the bottom 25 percentile on some of these, I don't know. It may cost millions to get us up there, man.
I think it's good to set a floor and a ceiling, actually. I think that's a really good
Kind of have a,
recommendation.
you know, we're always above the 50, or whatever the percentile happens to be.
No lower than and no higher, or close to, or, you know, with a target of,
Target
no lower
range.
than with a target of 25. So lower than the 50th percentile with a target of the 25.
The way this comes into play, I know, let's say with TASB, we always had a target for our fund balance. Like we didn't just keep a fund balance or just
Right.
more. I mean, more is always the answer somewhat, right? Like, let's make it
Right.
bigger. But we're happy if we've got a fund balance that's X percentage or between a certain range of what our annual budget is. And as long as you're within that range, I mean, we're doing okay and we're happy, you know. And I think salaries kind of ought to be that way too. Otherwise, it becomes a, how do you pay more kind of, which we just can't do.
So is everybody good with no lower than the 50th percentile with a target of the 25th percentile is our overarching statement? We just embedded
Like
it.
for fall still?
25th is the upper.
Well,
No, I
with
wouldn't
a
say
target
yeah,
of, I'm just saying with a target of that, so you're trying to hit that, it might be over that, it might be.
And then you guys can come to us and say, well, you know, we've now gotten above a 50th percentile on each of these, which is good, check that box. In these areas, we're paying far more than the top 25 percentile. Doesn't mean we're gonna lower the pay there, but at least we can see where we are compared to our target. You know, I mean, there needs to be some rationale besides just increasing pay because we're trying to increase pay. Because some of these may actually need quite a bit of a pay increase, and then some may not. I mean, just based on where we're at on these things, you know. And that's why we always had a problem with I always had a problem with just a flat 2% across the board. Then everybody just gets the exact same pay raise, which doesn't distinguish or pull out the ones that maybe get paid less than market versus above market.
You got some people that all they're doing is working for insurance.
Yeah, I mean,
sadly.
that's,
Well,
yeah.
so this year with the TASB study, my recollection is from 4 years ago, you'll actually get this full page trying to make adjustments for all these categories. And so it's not just 2%, it's gonna shake out to some number, but it's gonna be this pay grade needs to go up, this
Yeah.
one needs to go down, this one.
In your packet, pages 26 through 34 is actually the last salary study we did. In 13-14, in the very back of that, that gives you kind of an overall of, you know, what their recommendation is. That doesn't mean we have to accept their recommendations. We usually typically come back to the board and then make a, you know, have do board approval, look at where are we gonna make the adjustments.
What page
But
is
this
that
is-
one page I'm
On
talking
the
about?
very back,
I remember these like.
on the back of page 34.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, that kind of lays it out. And I see all the other pages do it too, with teachers is on page 8 of this project, and administrators on page 31, looks like.
Yeah, look on page 34, the cost of these recommendations is 93,000, blah, blah, blah. So that, and all that was the adjustment thing.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So like for stipends, instead of just giving everybody here a 5% increase in the stipend, you can see that some are probably above market, some are below market, and how do we adjust?
Yep.
You know, instead of just giving a flat across the board increase. Now I know some of these band directors, some places may do more or less than band directors elsewhere, and you know, different job titles, right?
Yeah.
Our last salary study, we dug in deep with stipends and we made a substantial amount of corrections.
Sure.
And it's obvious right here that the board at that time made a determination of 90%, so not fall out of the top deck on this
Well,
one.
that's fair. I haven't noticed that. That's a good point.
Right
So
there.
we said decile on that one.
90%. It's right there, it's right there on the back of page 34, the next,
Yeah.
two lines, market adjustments to employees below 90%. So it's right there where the board 13-14 made a determination, or 14-15 made a determination we'd be in the top decile. So that's, but again, we would have to, there's things in here that a number of years, how long the person's been here, but we could have, those numbers obviously moved in 4 years all over the place.
So this is actually setting the floor at 90%. The floor, not at 50%, it's setting the floor
I
at 90%.
think 50 is a little low.
50. I think
I think
the
it's
top
like
20, the
50.
25% should be the floor. Somewhere between 25% and 10% seems reasonable.
I mean, we can make it that 25%, so no lower than the 75th percentile with targeting the top decile.
Because that would be lowering the,
Yeah.
whatever the 90%.
We don't know how much that's gonna cost, we don't know what those numbers are for.
Yeah, all of this is just an exercise
Right.
of theory.
Yeah.
Because then you're gonna get a price tag and go, okay, are we doing it or not?
We're not at 30,000 feet, we're at 300,000 feet.
But to what extent do we follow this recommendation?
Well, they're gonna ask for that number. That's a really good point. They're gonna say, and so we, at this time, we gave them 90%. We gave
So
them
did
that
y'all
number.
approve all this in 14?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm just saying is,
So you already said it at 90.
so is everybody
It's
at
already
90?
there.
Shoot.
Are we already there? If we're already there at 90%,
Why would we change it?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
a little bit lower maybe, but
So in the budget parameter memo, probably, then we would just embed a statement that said that our target is top decile pay.
90 still seems a little high to me, top 10%, that's, like, that goes to Gary's point, is Gary, like, to some extent, they are already pretty highly paid, and that 90% is
On the
based on
comparison.
Market or companion districts or,
It was market.
this right here is market.
It's
We don't-
market
we don't know what market
because-
is.
Well, in the operations side, it needs to be to market because we could be losing custodial staff to the city of Schertz. We could be losing, other operating maintenance staff to other positions that are in the local area versus.
Then if we establish 90, then what we have on page 11, based on the market on the far right-hand column, we should be able to calculate, are we below market or not, based on 90%. That should be easy comparison.
On page,
On page 11, we've got the market minimum maximum. And at the very front, you got SCUC, and if the parameter from 13-14 was 90%, and that's what the board at that time established was a floor, then you should just be, you take a calculation, say, here's the current market, here's where we're at, are we at 90%?
Well, and that's kind of what Tasby's gonna do. We pulled
Yes.
these numbers ourselves. They're gonna go pull theirs out of their database.
this is based upon districts submitting their salary study through TASB HR. That's why Judson's not on here, because they did not do it, so.
Where'd that market number come from? Did that come from TASB, or did that come from?
Page 11.
On page 11,
Where'd the-
those are minimum and maximum rates that are board approved at each one of these districts for those positions.
The far right.
Yeah,
column.
The far right
Far right
says
says
market.
Market.
Okay, that came from TASB HR services, yes.
So that's what they're gonna use.
Okay, so that's where, so that right there tells you if we establish 90% 13-14, then it's a simple calculation to say, are we at 90% of the market and what we're paying right now? That'll tell you right now whether you're above or below 90.
pay someone else to do it, or you want us to do it?
Well, these are a year old.
Well, that's true, we'll always be in arrears, and they'll try to make it.
Well, will
current.
Tasby use that same info from last year?
But they're gonna also go to people and positions.
Right.
So this is the overall minimum and maximum based on your pay scales. But then they're also gonna dig into
All the
Wayne
additional.
Pruski and say, are you paid at market value, and are you above or below it? And if you're below it, they may make a recommendation that we need to give Wayne Pruski more money. And then we would come back to the board with the
All 1,800
recommendations.
positions is what you're
Yes.
asking.
They're gonna
Yeah.
give more of a granular report, and this is more of a broad
Yes,
report.
But
they're
they're
gonna
gonna
look at
start
these,
with
but then
it.
they're also
Yeah,
gonna
they'll
look
start with it.
person by person to see, are we paying them? So when we calculate the scales, is HR calculating them correctly based on these scales that we've said are board approved?
Again, you're going back to reestablish the baseline.
In the job descriptions.
Here's to be the bad guy here too. So let's say we said it, we're gonna pay the top 10% in every position, which is what I heard.
That's what 13-14
Is
said.
there a safe assumption that we're not doing that right now?
That's why we're asking the
That's what we're
question
asking.
tonight.
That's what he was saying, based upon a rough global level, you could probably get that based upon 11. That's what he's saying. But they're saying if you bring in Tasby, you'll get it at a more granular level.
I understand, I'm guessing, I'm just making a guess. If we were to set a goal as we're gonna pay everybody in this district in the top 10%, that would probably mean we have to pay money into the system,
There'd be a price tag.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
there's
we're
gonna be
already talking about we're
problems.
having a budget problems, and now I'm just telling you, if you're gonna set it at 10%, we're gonna probably looking at a huge chunk of change, the way I would look at it, to get us to that top 10%.
So not to.
I'm just, I don't know for sure. but
Well, just to add to that discussion, so here, it's an interesting dichotomy, because I would argue that, we're 200 or 300 positions understaffed, so that means that the people that we have hired are doing more than what is asked of them in those districts. So that's the group that you wanna make sure you're compensating, because it's kinda like, I think I said earlier, that you're going to war with special ops and not with the Army. So you've got these few people, so anyway, that's just a thought to
Yeah.
factor into that.
I just did the calculations on the first three there, and they're all over 50. I don't know if that means anything, but
Yeah.
You did the math.
I did that.
This is the first time though that we've really asked this far in advance before they started the study. The last time Tasby came and just did a presentation, and it was just real quick, to tell you the truth. I mean, now we're asking a little more robust conversation before we pick a number.
So they're all at over 90%. Go to Gary's point is, the board at that time, including Gary, myself, and I think maybe Finley,
I was there.
we all approved it. To what extent did the executive leadership team adhere to this plan review? If it was adhered to, then everybody should be over right around the 90%, 10%. So there's no use going out and spending $20,000 more if we're not gonna adhere to it, generate another report we're not gonna listen to. So we're
We
here.
brought the report back and asked the board for approval of the adjustments, and they were made.
Yeah, so theoretically, we should all, most everybody should be at the top 10% or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that, I don't know if every 5 years is the right time to do it, or 4 years, or 6 years, you're always gonna have creep. And, that, there's a certain point where every 10 years, maybe that's too long. But
Well, I think, if you guys look on page 31, I mean, it does show we're at the 99th percentile and or above, insofar as big groups are concerned.
From the last study.
Yeah, 31 of the handwritten numbers. There's this market summary in the middle there.
Yep.
I mean, I assume that concludes that we are paying, I mean, I'll just round it up to 100%. I mean, we're paying to the
Yeah,
top.
that's correct, 4 years ago, yes.
No, I take that. No, that's actually just saying we're paying to the market median. I mean, that's not saying we're in the top 10%.
That's
just
right,
saying-
that's just the market median in the middle.
So you could argue our auxiliary, we're paying a little bit less than average. Right?
1%.
See, that's, yes.
But that's a
So-
broad group. I mean, some people
Yeah.
probably overpay, some people underpay, we don't know.
That's why they're saying do the stats.
What Tasby's gonna do is make a recommendation to go get to that market median of 100%. And then by person, if there's somebody that's way under that 100%, they're gonna make a recommendation that we go adjust that person.
Yeah, because this is on page 31, this is summarizing everyone that wasn't mentioned before. That's what you're saying. See, it says other groups. They gave these specific recommendations for all the other groups, and then they said, oh, by the way, here's where these smaller groups are. I think that's what that's saying. Why does it say other groups? I don't understand why it says market summary, other groups. The title of it.
Other than teachers, I think is
Other
what they're
than
doing.
teachers,
Okay,
and then
teachers, and then you got everybody
teachers.
else.
Teachers here on the back of 30.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that's other than teachers.
And again, I don't know if it's top 10%, top 20%, but
Other groups.
the teachers are all above the median at least. From there, we don't know where it goes, but. Yeah, I would just say from a board perspective, we ought to just set a floor and an optimum range, I'd call it, I guess. And then our role, in my opinion, is to just ensure that you guys are actually taking a look at that and making those changes that need to be made instead of us looking at each individual job title. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
as long
so-
as we know you're doing it and you're reporting to us that you're doing it, that's the board's role.
So agree, that's what we need, and then I guess the second question is, do you want us to have TASB do it, or do you want us to do an internal analysis? Right?
I thought we'd already made that determination, so we've already,
Have we already contracted with them? Okay, so then, we need to tell TASB what the number is what I
Well,
mean.
On the back of page 30, there were numbers as of 13-14, biggest line. Back of page 30, teacher salary, local market median, where we were at. We were 105%, 106, 107, 109, 109, 103. That was in the survey was taken, that's where we were at teacher salary median. We weren't just 100%, we were well over 100%.
Yes, I'm saying, that doesn't tell you top 10, top 20, that's just telling you you're above average.
Right above the median.
So I don't know where between the 50th and 100th percentile it fits, I mean, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
It's just telling you you're above average.
Well, and I guess though, that's a good point, because the last time we just said compare us to the market median. So will they do it if we say compare us to the top quartile?
I would have to ask that question.
That's the really good,
Yeah.
I mean, because if we're gonna set this number, then that's kind of our question to them. We don't
Yeah.
want the market median, we wanna compare ourselves to the top quartile, or whatever that number is, and just see where we are compared to it.
That's a different measure.
It is a different measure.
And they may say we don't do that, and then we can say, okay, then we don't know if we need, if that's what we're determining, then maybe we don't need the service.
Well, I think every so many years you should continue to have an outside set of eyes look at this, because when you look at they're gonna look at individual employees, and if we haven't done our due diligence as far as salaries, then we could be paying inequitably towards individuals. Teachers are different because the teachers are on a scale, and, you know, once they prove up 5 years, they're gonna get the same amount, but every other position in this district is all based on putting you into a pay range. And in that pay range, you gotta make sure that you're paying equitably in that pay range. So having this service helps, and now outside, you know, every 4 years or 5, whatever we decide, but that lets an outside set of people come
So
in
when
and
do
take
they
a look
start?
at.
When do they start, or when are they projected to start?
Well, we're geared to have a conference call in the next week or so, and then.
Well, you're waiting for this meeting, okay.
Is there any opposition to the top quartile being the lower floor? Is there any opposition to that? Can at least find some consensus on that? I mean, we're 90% now. Top.
We're already,
So that's the floor. He wants a floor.
Who said we were in the top 90%?
No, I'm just saying, well, according to this one.
probably, but that's a 90% median.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a different measure.
It
That's not the
is.
same thing as being in the top 10%.
No.
Well, can we, what's the floor? What do you want the floor to be?
That's a very different measure.
It's a different measure, but what's the floor? If we were paying in the top 25% of, is that good enough for us?
I'm not sure you can make a determination until you know what the numbers look like as far as where we're at or where we want to be. Until we know what those numbers look
Do
like.
we have to give them
we're
a
kind
number?
of
Well,
guessing.
I think that they'll appreciate it, because then they're bringing a report that's more reflective of what we're desiring, instead of just generating a report and we ask them a bunch of questions.
I can ask the question too, if they look at that as, I mean, can they even determine that with top quartile?
So the question would be, the board wanting us to strive to be in the quartile, can you shape this report to help us know where we are with that target? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, but even with to their point, it's a different measure, the top quartile being, what's the whole group? Are we talking about our comparison group? Are we talking about South Texas, anywhere within 100 miles? What's the comparison group? In order to be in the top quartile, you have to have a larger group.
They're gonna establish a market group, I mean.
Which is your local area.
Probably the metropolitan area.
So out of the,
It's
It would be
probably based
this-
on a commute, the
Yeah.
mileage too.
This one.
Probably
It was on
probably
back
San
at
Antonio
35.
metropolitan area.
Yes.
as long as you know what the comparison group is,
Yeah, we don't know what those numbers look like, so first as soon as we're gonna be at this level, I know what that base set numbers look like. We're kind of just throwing dirt against the dartboard.
as long as we pay more than Southwest.
We don't know that. We don't know what that number looks like.
We know
But
historically.
they're looking for direction, and we're just saying, give us a whole bunch of information, I think. Are you looking for direction, or you just, what does the contract say? I'm trying to.
Well, they're gonna do a report similar to this, which is looking at the median and making sure that people are near that 100% of the median. You know, if you're over it, doesn't mean you're gonna take money away from an employee, but if you're under it, then you can do some pay adjustments for that. And they're gonna look at the San Antonio area, both in school districts and then the operations side, they're gonna go out and look at light jobs, you know, what do plumbers make in the local area? Similar to what ours do, because those, you can't just go after school districts
And
there.
that's what Robert's saying, because in the past, we were thinking, you know, we're gonna do the salary and compensations, where do we wanna be on pay? We wanna be, but then when you're looking at the TASB study, it's a different benchmark, so we're not gonna make a decision until we look at the TASB study.
That may be the best way to do it, that's fine, I was just thinking the same thing.
And
Let's
that's what
get it
Deb's saying,
back,
is we
and then
can't
it's-
compare, but then I understand what Robert's saying, because last time it looked like 90% was sent at the market.
But that was a median number, that was not a
That wasn't the top.
court,
yes.
that was not a,
So let's just get this back and save this conversation for 2021 budget. Because we'll probably.
And I guess ask them too, can they benchmark differently, so we
will
can
ask
see?
them that,
Yeah.
for sure.
So the big picture, I'm definitely in favor of doing this so many years, because I know in the past we've had times when the board was anti-administrator, so we'd give administrators no pay and we'd lump it in with the teachers, right? Just, and it all, and over time, that just gets things all skewed, you know?
That's true.
And then you just get out of balance, and then it takes you a lot of effort to get back in balance. And by doing this over so many years, I think it kind of tries to keep you within some kind of framework of
Yep.
a rational goal, not just X% every year, and not just playing politics by giving some raises and some people not raises and that kind of thing.
So-
Kind of keeps a rational plan in place.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm not joking when I say this, so at the December report, it probably should be staffing and salary, because back to the same point, the board just needs to weigh in on salary before we start to work on the budget. That's really the bottom line, we just need to kind of give a report. Now, this year.
And we won't have the TASB
We won't have
salary
the
study back.
TASB, that's
yet.
what I'm saying, it's probably gonna
Does
be
that come back, how long?
That
it'll be in
would
the
probably be
spring.
end of February, March, before you get that
Right
back.
when the budget.
Right, so but we'll just have to say, and don't forget that so here we're having this discussion about budget parameter, and then, oh, don't forget the TASB studies coming. We gotta have that conversation. That's kind of how that's gonna go, and that's okay.
we don't approve the budget till August anyway.
Well, last time they gave it to us on February 20th,
Yeah.
2014.
Well, if
Ballparking.
if you're gonna consider going to the voters, you would need to make that decision by June. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying, so I know the budget's not approved until August, but you would have to make that decision by May. Paige, right?
Well, if we get back February, March, that gives us 60 days to pour through the numbers and make a determination.
Right. Okay, all right. What do you, bring us home, benefits.
Let's go to benefits. My favorite topic.
Yeah.
Okay, page 35 is our recruitment flyer. It really is just showing you the types of benefits that we do offer, so that you kind of know the package that we have. Page 36 and 37, I've actually taken the comparisons of what districts are offering around us as far as their benefits, who their carrier is, what their deductible is. The first number is your individual deductible, the second number is your family deductible. These are definitely not apples to apples. You cannot compare insurance apples to apples because every plan is different. You can tweak within a plan to only contract through certain physicians. You can only, you can only use the Baptist hospital system and not the Methodist. There's ways that you can cheapen a plan by doing things like that. Our plans are pretty robust. They have access to almost every physician probably in this local area. In the San Antonio area, they have access to any hospital system. We've not done that to cheapen our plans. And so just as a caution, I mean, looking overall, we're about where everybody else is as far as how much we pay into the benefits, and then definitely just taking a look at where we are compared to the other rates that people are having to pay across the districts. I believe Northeast is the only district that is self-insured. The rest of them will be fully insured. Our rates based on self-insured this year, and then there's 4 districts in here that are under the TRS Active Care. So you'll kind of see just an adjustment there. I just wanted to make sure we put together some data on what other districts are paying into their employees are having to pay into insurance. On page 38, this is the most recent we have of information from our fully insured plans from up till May this last year. This is from Gallagher. This tells you how much money we were paying into premiums and then how much they were having to pay out for claims. So if you look at the bar graph on the bottom left-hand side, the blue line is actually how much UnitedHealthcare had to pay in claims per month for our plans. The gray line is actually how much we gave them in premiums. So this data looks very good for us moving into a self-insured product, because what we want to do is keep that money here locally versus sending it to a health insurance company, hopefully being able to build that fund we have for health insurance and then do some things to help our employees with some cost savings. We were at about a 68.2% overall claim rate versus premium rate up until May of last year. So you look at that, if they give 100% of the money towards premiums, they only needed 68% of that to pay the claims. So that's a big differential that we would love to have here versus giving it to a healthcare company. The next is just on life insurance to page 39. A couple years ago when we moved into UnitedHealthcare, we were able to up the amount of life insurance policy for our employees that the district pays. So we went from a $10,000 policy to a $25,000 policy for our staff members, and then they're able to buy additional life insurance above and beyond that. So every employee in our district currently receives a $25,000 life insurance policy.
Is that standard?
Actually, most districts are given $10,000. We were able to increase it when we went to UnitedHealthcare.
Yeah, the cost difference is not huge.
They threw it in as a perk on the bid.
Yeah, it was a perk to, as part of it. It wasn't a big difference in the amount.
That's what I mean, insurance, the cost difference is not as much as you think it is.
Yeah.
It's not 2.5 times.
Right.
Page 40, this is on our DEC local on their leave payout system. This is on reimbursement for leave upon separation, whether that be retirement or after 10 years. If you leave us because you're resigning, then you have some leave payout that you can definitely take advantage of. We need to do a better job of advertising this as a benefit to our staff members. I don't know that they all know that this is sitting in our policy, that once, if you save your leave, once you resign from us after 10 years or you retire from us, then you're able to get a leave offset and get paid out for the leave that you have gathered. So I think we're going to try to do more, just letting our staff members know about this, especially as we work on staff attendance as a priority 2 goal.
Is there a maximum?
On some of it, there's a maximum. On the state leave, there's a maximum of leave, and on local leave, there is not a maximum.
Didn't we just change this?
We just discussed.
This is the current policy, it'll be in the next update. And actually, we'll go to the board this next month for approval. We moved out that the 5-year, and moved everybody to a 3-year timeframe.
See, this is not the current one.
No, it's not the most current.
Yeah, myself.
Yeah. Page 41 is the providers that we have to offer for the 403Bs. We allow them to go ahead and take out a retirement system beyond the TRS. And these are the vendors that have been vetted through TRS. And so our employees have access to use any one of these vendors. And then it can run through our payroll system to go ahead and establish a 403B. And at any point in time, they can start one, or they can increase the amount during the year. It's not done as school starting and we do the benefits, it's not done on the benefits enrollment. You can do this above and beyond.
What kind of percentage do we have doing it? Do we know percentage we have
Do you
doing
have any
it?
idea how many are doing the 403B?
I can get it for you.
I was just wondering,
Yeah.
just
But
because of
you-
TRS.
Yeah, and now, that probably is good because at SCUCU and with the new teachers, we're going to start teaching the importance of this. So
Also
then we
want it by category too, probably, of what types of employees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Well,
that's
because-
good because then we can start measuring, are our communications working?
Well,
Because the-
because you did that presentation on TRS, and I know people inside that.
Well, they walked up the stairs and took out a
Yeah,
403B
and
to
then-
ride.
Because they were there
That's
at
right.
the SCUC.
And next week, we're going to the new teacher academy to do the same presentation, because now is the time when teachers need to start 403B.
Well, assuming that they're 20-something or 30-something years old, that's
Yes.
the right time to.
Yeah.
We might have some.
Yes, we can get that.
Yeah, I bet it would be good to start tracking it, because
No
if we're
rush.
gonna start communicating, it would be good to watch, are we making an impact? Are we getting more and more signing up? And just in case you're curious, TRS does not wanna be in charge of this list, I assure you, and I don't know how we got in charge of it, but
Yeah.
it just, they put it in a law and just so you know, all we did as a board at TRS is put a fee on it. And what that did is it eliminated a lot of riffraff that they were just throwing stuff, it was like scam stuff. So like we have a $5,000 fee now, so you have to fill out the paperwork, pay a $5,000 fee, and you get on the list. And we do have a lawyer that looks through all of them to make sure it's not shady money.
You don't look to see what their Morningstar ratings are or anything?
They look at all that. We have lawyers that look at all that. So all I know is that when we set that rule, a lot of the shady stuff stopped. And when we put a $5,000 fee on it, a lot of that shady stuff stopped. And so that's all we were trying to do to make it better on teachers and them not getting hoodwinked.
Yes. And as that list of TRS is updated, we update our list here as well. And the other way we encourage on page 42 with the healthcare, and this is part of our presentation as well, is just being more mindful about saving for your own healthcare through an HSA. HSAs, it's not the old use it or lose it, it's something that they can actually take into retirement. So especially if they're on those high deductible plans, we're really encouraging them to, start putting things away in an HSA, let it build for yourself, and then when you do need to hit your deductible, it's there for you versus having to go into your pockets to get it.
HSA is the one you can carry from year to year?
It does, and it's your account, so you take it into retirement. If you were to leave us, it's your account.
Instead of the other one, which is.
Now, the flexible spending is a use it or lose it.
Okay, so quick, Scott, what's the market to median ratio on page 30? No, I'm just kidding. Pop test.
Big pack.
Yeah, it's a big one. That's good, we got what we need, yeah, and we really appreciate the time, it's good discussion.
And the time you're gonna put into this.
It's good. November and December, Wayne, we're big into the EPP and those large expenditures, just as an awareness piece, and see if there's any questions.
There's nothing more. There was, David wanted me to read something. He sent me an email, so there's nothing more. You finished?
Okay.
Is there anything more at all? I know this meeting is our first meeting to begin discussing the 2019-2020 budget. In particular, tonight, to discuss personnel issues related to the budget. However, I would like to make a request that may have some benefit to the 2018-2019 budget. I mentioned this to Robert and to Dr. Gibson already. I have rescinded my request to attend the 2019 NASB conference. I'm requesting that all board members who were planning to do the same. I think spending funds to attend this conference in light of our current budget issues sends the wrong message to our staff members whom we are asking to make sacrifices every day. We don't need to attend NASB. After all, we get our mandatory continuing education credits at the Tacit TASB conference and for the less cost to the district. Please accept my request in the spirit it is intended. I feel like this is one way we can show that we're willing to do our part. Have a great meeting. Thank you, David. That was it.
So we did have 2 or 3 workshops selected to present, so I think we have a deadline of October 12 to decline. Just FYI, so Priscilla and I would need to know that before 12 October so we could say that we're not presenting, if that was the desire of the full board.
I read his letter. It's free to, y'all can take it for what you want to, but if there was a way that, how many, 3 presentations?
How many-
All of
Yours was.
There was
All
3.
three.
Social media, good governance, and emergency planning.
And even John, the security.
The security one, which we're gonna spotlight that EMAP.
Well, I mean, I guess is this a topic to discuss or not?
Well,
I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just sort of saying, in the big scope of things, even though we're not discussing it, the fewest number of people that could.
So you're going to throw out somewhat in light of what we just did, where you compare salaries in various districts. I'll just make a comment. If you compare how much we spend on travel and training for school board members versus our peers, we're probably in the bottom 25%. So this district gets a lot of bang for its buck, and it's the school board, if you ask me. We spend a lot less on training than travel, and you got a pretty good school board compared to some places where they'll send 20 people to these national conferences, and so just. What is our overall budget for board training and travel?
yeah, I don't know the
Ballpark what we
exact
spend.
number, but it is.
We've gone some
I would
years
say
where-
you are comfortably in the bottom quartile.
Yeah,
That is
there have been years where we spend $500 or less per person. I mean, just
Yeah.
So just put things in perspective.
If you wanted it read, I read it. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn at 7:37.
Thank you.